The March 28th meeting of the Ways and Means Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Andrews, Mr. Antelli, Mr. Daniele, Mr. Esposito, Mr. Gamina, Mr. Haney, Mr. Hanna, Mr. McCann, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Tucciarello, Chairman Yolovich.
Here. Are there any speakers signed up for the public forum?
There are not.
Is there anyone here not signed up that would like to speak? Hearing none. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from the February 29th, 2012 meeting, and they will stand approved unless the clerk is notified by any changes by the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is new business. Madam Clerk.
Referral 12-114.
Moved by Legislator Gamina, seconded by Legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may ask through you to the administration about the way the reimbursement works on this. Is it the county that's being reimbursed for services we're providing to administer this, or is the reimbursement primarily going in cases when the owner-operator offender cannot pay? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, Bob Burns from the Office of Probation. It is related to the administration of the program, the work by reimbursing the work of probation officers and other staff to receive the orders from the court, to check with the vendors to make sure that the ignition interlock has been installed, to deal with the alerts we receive from the company, and so on. The installation costs are borne by the offender himself, and the monitoring cost of the vendor, the computer costs, are borne by the offender as well.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Chairman, so this grant will reimburse all of the county's operating costs to administer the program?
Through the chair, no, it's not all, and it's only a one-year grant. It's a governor's traffic safety grant that was awarded. It was acknowledged by our state regulatory agency, the Office of Probation and Community Alternatives in Albany, that this was a burden on local probation agencies and other monitoring agencies. And for 2 years now in a row, they have developed this reimbursement pattern, which gives us some relief from the work that's being done by existing staff.
I see. So through you, Mr. Chairman, when it says no additional net county support, it means you already have funding budgeted to administer this program. This will help alleviate some of that.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, then if this is not being used to reimburse the centers who are required to pay for this when the court determines the offender cannot, does that mean that those centers have to absorb the cost of the installation and monitoring fully?
Through the chair, that's correct. The law allows judges to waive the installation and the monthly monitoring cost if they feel that the offender is unable to pay. And in that case, the cost is borne by the vendors themselves.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, do we have any idea for the cases we've seen in Monroe County what percentage roughly that happens?
Through the chair, I can get that information through the county exec's office to the legislature. I don't know right now. It's a significant number, though. It's a number a little bit higher than we thought. The estimate was no more than 10% of cases would be waived. I think we're in the 8 or 9% of cases, but I can check that and get back to you.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I'd like to know if that is become any kind of deterrent to any private businesses who might perform this service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-115. Acceptance
Moved by
of a
Legislator
grant.
McCann, seconded by Legislator Daniele. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-116.
Moved by
Acceptance.
Legislator Daniele, seconded by Legislator Tucciarello. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-117.
Moved by
Authorize.
Legislator Tucciarello, seconded by Legislator Antelli. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-118. Authorized
Moved by Legislator
contracts.
Antelli, seconded by Legislator Hanna. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-119, authorize.
Moved by legislator Hannah, seconded by legislator Gamina. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-120,
Moved by
authorize.
legislator Gamina, seconded by legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-121, authorize.
Moved by legislator McCann, seconded by legislator Daniele. Is there any discussion? Legislator Daniele.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. Simple question, hopefully. What's the timeline on this project? When would we anticipate seeing this come to fruition?
Through the chair, this summer, we plan on doing the work.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-122, authorize.
Moved by legislator Daniele, seconded by legislator Tucciarello. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-123.
Moved by legislator Tucciarello, seconded by legislator Antelli. Is there any discussion? Legislator Gamina.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This grant has doubled. We're wondering why that is.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Franklin from Department of Human Services. This grant has actually probably a little more than doubled, and it came about due to the extraordinary session held by our state legislature last December. The original appropriation was in the range of about $1 million, give or take, and this new appropriation provided an additional $1.6 million. Quite honestly, it came literally as a surprise both to county and the Children's Institute staff. It was not expected.
Through you, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Is there any data on how many families have been reached by this project or through this project?
Mr. Chairman, there is data. The Children's Institute is actually the program manager. They actually track this on an annual basis, and I could get my hands on an annual report if the committee would like me to. I would say that at its peak, perhaps late 2010, the program was serving approximately a little over 600 children per month. I could not comment tonight on the cumulative number of families that have been served. The program has been running for perhaps 6 years.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that there was extensive conversation about this last night at Human Services, and I've gotten some of that reported. I'd just like to understand a little bit about the population that this money will help, the targeted amount. As I understand it, this money is going to be utilized for families that make a little bit more in terms of income than the traditional families we serve with our child care funding. And this allows for up to 275% of the poverty level, I believe. And the referral says that, up to 275% of the poverty level. But my understanding from the conversation last night is that this facilitated enrollment will be focused only on families from the 165% of the poverty level, which is the cutoff for our, for lack of a better term, traditional child care funds, up to the 275 level. And I wanted to know through you, Mr. Chairman, if that's accurate, and if so, why it's only being used for that segment of the population, and why not for anyone below 275% of the poverty level.
Mr. Chairman, that is a correct characterization of the focus of this program. The way the contract is structured between New York State OCFS and the Children's Institute has this program, for lack of a better phrase, picking up where the county leaves off. Since the county currently serves in its low-income daycare program families with income up to 165%, Children's Institute's demonstration project picks up where we leave off, so that would be 165.0 up to the 275% of federal poverty.
And through Mr. Chairman, is there anything that prevents legally speaking, Children's Institute from serving a family that is maybe within the county's range but unable to be served because of lack of funds?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe there are any legal restrictions. I would have to rely on Children's Institute's interpretation of their contract with OCFS.
Okay, I guess, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request maybe an interpretation like that from the county or Children's Institute, just to be clear on what the funds can be used for. I know this is an issue, a longstanding issue, because of the sort of nature of the funding that comes to us from the state and federal government for child care being inconsistent, so to speak. And to that point, knowing that there was an unexpected spike just this past December, how are we, or are we managing that money to make sure we don't, or Children's Institute doesn't enroll a lot of families that then perhaps might not be able to stay in the program if the money doesn't materialize again going forward? Is there any kind of variation that exists to make sure that doesn't happen, or do we just spend what we get, and then if we don't get as much the next year, we cut families off? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Monroe County does have a pretty good collaborative and working relationship with the Children's Institute. We do meet periodically with their management staff regarding the Child Care Dollars program. Having said that, I do want to be clear in that the management of the program really is left to the Children's Institute. They're the organization that contracts with the state and is paid to administer the program. Monroe County's role primarily has been limited to the final determination of eligibility and the payment processing for the actual subsidy payments. Children's Institute does work with a variety of local unions and daycare providers to help families who may be eligible in the enrollment process. Children's Institute actually collects the applications, gives them a first pre-screen, so to speak, before forwarding them to Monroe County. As in hindsight, probably not as surprising as it initially was, enrollment in this program is slow to ramp up. I believe within the first month or so of operations, Children's Institute had received, I want to say, around 180 to 190 applications for this program. I'm sorry, I can't tell you how many applications have received to date, but in the month of February, we made approximately 160 subsidy payments for services provided in January. The design of the program is to provide subsidies for 1 year to eligible families unless something in the family circumstances change. For example, they move. But in terms of what happens if the money does not materialize, Children's Institute and the county manages the funding to try and project what portion of the funds are obligated to serve currently enrolled families, and may work with Children's Institute to stop accepting new applications months into the program to make sure that families don't apply only to find no money's available.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, sort of technically speaking, I guess, number 2 in the specific legislative actions, I don't understand the amount of money that's being appropriated into the budget line. Could someone explain why is that amount and not the full amount of the grant?
Mr. Chairman, through you, what is being appropriated tonight is actually the difference between the additional funding that was appropriated in December and what Monroe County has already budgeted for 2012.
So that number indicates how much more we got than we expected.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? I might have one quick question, Mr. Franklin.
Yes, sir.
We had a situation several years ago that comes to mind about us possibly rolling over money and then losing the funding the following year. Is this the same situation?
Mr. Chairman, no, this is actually not the same situation. In fact, the Child Care Dollars program doesn't receive allocations every single year, but it almost receives allocations each year. Each year, the funding has exceeded demand, and New York State has had no problems at all allowing Children's Institute to roll forward these funds to the next subsequent year.
That's great. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Referral 12-124,
Moved by
acceptance.
Legislator Antelli, seconded by Legislator Hannah. Is there any discussion? Legislator Gamino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the administration, how many families are enrolled in this program each year, or perhaps this year?
Mr. Chairman, approximately 1,400 children are on the program at any one time, so the total number of children can be a little bit more than that, somewhere in the range of 1,500 to 1,700.
Thank you, Dr. Doniger. And through you, Mr. Chair, will the approximately $30,000 decrease or $29,000 decrease in funding negatively affect the enrollment?
Mr. Chairman, no. Basically, the way we've handled the decrease is to put less money into the non-personnel expenses that we had in the budget last year, so it doesn't put any extra pressure on the staffing in the program, which is really how we manage the program. It's very labor-intensive dealing with the families and the providers.
Thank you. And one last question. In terms of eligibility for early intervention, how old must the children be, and do they age out once they reach kindergarten age?
Mr. Chairman, the program is from birth to the third birthday. There's another program that we operate called the Preschool Special Ed Program that covers from the child's third birthday until school entry.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Legislator O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. There's been a lot of concern expressed to many of us as legislators here locally about what the impact of the budget that's currently being worked on and passed as we speak in Albany now. Is it premature to know what impact the budget that we're passing by our state legislature now might be on this program next year? Do you have any insight into that?
Mr. Chairman, we have been trying to get that information from NISAC and some of the other health advocacy groups that have the inside track on what's going on in Albany. Literally today, I've seen some emails, but we really just don't know what the outcome will be. I think in the next couple of days it will become clear.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. O'Brien?
Yes, thank you.
Legislator McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, this is a little bit off topic, but related to the whole discussion. I believe it was last year, Legislator O'Brien and I had a memorializing resolution in support of increasing the reimbursement rates for the preschool funding by the state for the program that are offered, the programs that are offered for the early intervention kids. I had the opportunity to talk to the superintendent of BOCES 2 today about something unrelated to this, and the subject of those reimbursement rates came up. My understanding, Dr. Doniger, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, is that Monroe County, BOCES 1 and BOCES 2, along with Broome County, are the only BOCES in New York State that offer the preschool services for the early intervention, the kids covered under the early intervention program, and the issue of those reimbursements that are outdated based on reimbursement rates that are probably 5 or 6 years old are a threat to the continuation and the viability of those programs. And I know BOCES 1 and 2 are both assessing what they're going to do if those reimbursement rates don't go up. And again, that's not our control. That's not our situation. Are you familiar at all with where that stands or what that might be? And again, as I've mentioned before, I have a son who has gone through 2 years of the preschool in BOCES 1. And I can say without a doubt it made a tremendous difference for him in terms of preparing him for kindergarten. And in terms of the cost with that, not having him in those 2 years of preschool, I would assume that the school district would have had significantly higher costs providing his education had he not had that preparation. And again, just to look at that point as a dollar and cents point, but also in terms of a quality of life and getting him used to and prepared for school through those preschool programs. Do you have any comment or anything on that?
Mr. Chairman, I was not aware of the difference between the BOCES operations in our county and Broome County and the rest of the state. They have, for the last 20 years, been big participants in the program. The program has changed a little bit. There's been more emphasis on trying to provide services in the home or in child care rather than bringing children into classrooms. That's traditionally where BOCES has done most of its services. So there really is sort of a changing landscape. And candidly, the employees in BOCES are very well paid and have very high benefits since they're government employees. And candidly, the costs of those programs are somewhat higher than the smaller providers in the community. So this has made it a difficult situation for them to stay afloat, basically. The reimbursements that they get through this program, the rates are set by the state, are not always covering their costs, and they may be using funds from another program to subsidize this program.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-125.
Moved by legislator Hannah, seconded by legislator Gamina. Is there any discussion on this subject? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Referral 12-126.
Moved by
Authorize.
legislator Gamina, seconded by legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-127. Authorize.
Moved by legislator McCann, seconded by legislator Daniele. Is there any discussion? Ms. Andrews. Excuse me, legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the administration, I know there was some dialogue on this referral in the EPW committee, but I wasn't at that committee meeting. So just if I could get an explanation as to the justification or the rationale for building holding cells on the MCC campus, please.
Through the chair, if I may defer to MCC representatives that are here today.
Before Hezzy gets up to answer that, Carrie, let me just say that they're not considered holding cells, they're holding rooms. I was corrected yesterday when I called them holding cells.
They are referred to as holding cells in the referral.
Yeah, well, they're...
But, thank you.
Through the chair, these are what we call, frankly, interviewing rooms. And therefore, in order to secure both a victim or a perpetrator. And the reason for them is because the college has decided that we would like to become certified under CALIA. And this is one of the requirements.
Thank you. Through the chair, certified under CALIA. Can you explain what that is?
CALIA is a national, through the chair, it's a national law enforcement certifying agency for the U.S.
And through the chair, what's the benefit then of having that certification, or how does it enhance MCC?
Through the chair, CALIA has standards that we believe would, by adhering to them, will improve the professionalism of our entire peace officers on the campus. We are, as you know, we are now being led by the former chief of police here in Rochester. But it's his opinion that we can raise the level of our professionalism by having this certification.
Through the chair, then, are there other requirements then, in addition to building the holding rooms or interviewing rooms? in order to receive the certification for CALIA that this college will have to go through?
Through the chair, yes, over 100.
And what are they through the chair?
Through the chair, I'll have to get back to you with the
Okay, that'd be
listing
fine.
of those.
Thanks. So through the chair, if this is mostly to receive a certification that the school feels is advantageous, what's the process now? I mean, where would such interviews take place at this current time if they were necessary?
Through the chair, they take place now on campus, downstairs, sometimes in a room that we have set aside, or in other places on the campus, depending on where the incident occurred. We don't feel that it's a safe environment to have, depending on the aggravation, to have that in such an open environment.
Thanks. Through the chair, then, how often are the rooms used? I mean, what sort of situations would justify or necessitate having to use interviewing rooms?
Through the chair, I don't know exactly how often, but I do know it's frequent. It's because it's not just simply, as we said, a holding cell. It's an interviewing room. So whenever there's an issue that we feel containment is necessary, we will use those rooms, and in the future we will use the new rooms.
Thank you. I know you're going to provide with some further information about the other certification requirements. Could you also provide with that an estimated cost? I mean, I assume that we're going to have to authorize the expenditure of some funds, or the college will incur some additional costs if it's going to go down this route. Is that correct?
Through the chair, do you mean additional costs for the certification?
Yes, please.
Yes, it's through the chair, $6,500.
Oh, for the total certification, it'd be $6,500?
Correct.
Okay. I guess those are all my questions at the moment. In reading it, since it doesn't say interviewing rooms, it says holding cells. It was a little disconcerting, certainly. I don't know. Do you know perhaps if this is something that's customary on other college campuses to have these sort of secure interviewing rooms for students?
Through the chair, I can't answer that question, so I will find out for you.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. Because assuming that if it's a very serious incident, then the police or the sheriffs take over, and you're correct? Then you would turn it over to law enforcement to handle?
Through the chair, that is correct. If it's an arrest, we generally turn to the Brighton Police Department.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Legislator Tucciarello.
Chair, you refer to them as holding cells where you could put either perpetrators or victims. Do you normally want to put victims in a holding cell? How does that work?
Through the chair, again, we don't refer to them as holding cells. We refer to them as interviewing rooms.
What would the room look like on the inside? What would be part of that room?
Currently, it's just an office.
Office, if you were going to hold somebody in there, would there be a system to restrain somebody?
Through the chair, if it's a perpetrator, he or she would be handcuffed.
Okay. What would happen if you had a victim and a perpetrator at the same time?
Through the chair, they would not be in the same room.
Okay. Through the chair, do you have a second room available for that?
Through the chair, we do.
Through the chair, what is that room like?
Through the chair, again, today it would simply be an office.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Legislator Haney.
Through the chair, I think the problem at Environment and Public Works was perhaps the wording here, where it says holding cells. And to me, a holding cell is something with bars and sliding, the stuff you see on TV. I take it that's not what we're talking about?
Through the chair, that is not what we are talking about.
Okay, what will this room look like? Is it just an ordinary room, but the door is more secure or something?
Through the chair, the design and engineering of this has not yet been done, and so when that begins to surface, we would have a much better response to that question.
But it's not a cell in the ordinary connotation of that term.
Through the chair, that is my understanding. It's not a jail cell.
Thank you.
Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the project itself, in terms of financially, through you, I'm not sure who the best person to ask is, what's the estimated cost for the entire renovation project? And I think this was asked at the previous EPW, but I wasn't here for the answer. There was some question reviewing this referral about why there's construction management services being approved at this point if design hasn't even been done. So through the chair, I guess I'd like to potentially reiterate that question if it was asked
Mr.
before.
Garland explained that pretty thoroughly, but
Thank you.
Mike, if you do it again, please.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there are some capital projects where we identify the benefit of having a construction manager on board throughout the project, primarily during construction. But there is benefit for continuity purposes to engage the construction manager earlier on in the project to perform services such as cost estimating, scheduling, constructability review, as well as coordination of the construction documents between the trades. Much of those services would typically be provided by the architect or engineer, but because we've identified the benefit of having a CM on the job through construction, there's a benefit to get the CM involved early on, again, for continuity services. There's not a replication of those services. The architect and engineer would not perform those. It would be incumbent upon the CM or construction manager to perform those services.
Thank you. If I may continue through, Mr. Chairman. So I assume then that the $62,000 we're approving is simply an initial payment to that CM, and they'll have additional fees, obviously, when we get to the construction phase?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Those are design phase services that they're providing.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, then that means that in this particular case, the Chase Construction will be the CM for both phases? Is that where the benefit comes in?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. I guess at some point I'd like to talk to you more about how you make a decision as to whether you bring a CM in earlier or you rely on the architect, just to understand that decision process. But thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion? Legislator Hannah.
Through the chair, just one clarification here. Could you tell me what that certification is again and what it stands for?
CALIA.
CALIA. What does that stand for?
Can I defer to Cynthia? Do you know the acronym?
I'm sorry, I thought I did have it. I do not have it, but I can get that to you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-128,
Moved by
authorize.
Legislator Daniele, seconded by Legislator Tucciarello. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Referral 12-130, authorize
Moved
a
by
contract.
Legislator Tucciarello, seconded by Legislator Antelli. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-131, erroneous
Moved by
assessment.
Legislator Antelli, seconded by Legislator Hannah. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Referral 12-132, erroneous
Moved by
assessment.
Legislator Hannah, seconded by Legislator Gamina. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-134,
Moved by
approving.
Legislator Gamina, seconded by Legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-135,
Moved by
acceptance.
Legislator McCann, seconded by Legislator Daniele. Is there any discussion? Legislator O'Brien.
And through you to the administration, do we have an idea of how much restitution we received as a result of the CARP program?
Through the chair, last year in 2011, we recovered about $546,000. The year before that, $518,000, and the year before that, $519,000.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, please.
Referral 12-136.
Moved by
amend-
legislator Daniele, seconded by legislator Tucciarello. Is there any discussion? Legislator Haney.
Mr. Chairman, there's a very large spread in the bids. I mean, the low bid is 4.7, 4.8 million, and the high bid was 6.4. The second low was 5.1. It strikes me that this is unusual, that there's such a wide spread in the bid amounts. Is there something unique here?
Through the chair, Scott Leathersich with the Monroe County Department of Transportation. No, there's nothing unique. We tabulated and verified all the bids, and the math was correct.
So you're, even though the low bidder is so far below the others, you feel comfortable that they really can perform the job for that amount?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. Second question, Mr. Chairman. We're being asked to approve an increase in the amount of the project. And the project is more than doubling in cost. It's going from 3.4 million to 7 million, which is basically 100% increase in cost. Could you give us some justification for this?
Through the chair, yes, I can. This project was last estimated for the capital budget in 2007. That would have been for programming in the 2009 capital budget. Since that time, in 2008, we experienced a dramatic increase in construction costs due to oil that year. That resulted in about a 25% cost increase at that time. The remaining cost increases are related to scope changes to the project based on development demands out there that were generating additional traffic. Much of these additions, which I think are identified in the referral as well, include additional turn lanes and auxiliary lanes at the East Henrietta Road intersection, additional turn lanes and through lanes at the South Clinton Avenue intersection, an additional turn lane at Sawgrass Drive. For portions of the road where we had anticipated a standard mill and resurface, we needed to do a more in-depth structural rehabilitation, which required a deeper depth, and also there was some water main relocation that needed to take place that was unanticipated.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, the scope of this project has really significantly changed. Is that what we're saying?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Of the 7 million, I know the Water Authority is going to be reimbursing, I guess it's 119,000. And I think there's a private property owner that's going to be reimbursing part of the cost. Did I read that here someplace?
Through the chair, that's correct, 26,000.
Oh, that's only 26,000? Is that a full recovery of whatever the cost is of the betterment that we're doing to benefit that piece of property?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are there any other recoveries that we'll be making other than those two?
Through the chair, in terms of private betterment shares, no. The project is federally funded, though, so we're getting the 95% federal aid contribution towards the project as well.
Oh, so even with the doubling in the cost of the project, we'll still be able to get 95% federal reimbursement?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Are there other projects that have had to be, I mean, as I understand it, the federal pot is a fixed pot. Are there other projects that we've had to bump in order to get the additional money for this project?
Through the chair, in the years subsequent to this project being adopted in the 2009 capital budget, the federal program did incur some fund reductions, and at the Genesee Transportation Council level, through the TIP, adjustments were made throughout the program through all agencies involved to make accommodations to keep projects programmed and still receive the federal funding. So there's a series of changes that did cause delays. This project was one of them, but there are others that were affected in the program.
Oh, so the reason for the delay is in the, because I think you said it was programmed as a 2009 project?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Right.
And then it subsequently got delayed to
And the reason it's
2012.
been delayed is as the Genesee Transportation Council juggled the reduced dollars, this program in effect got put off so that other projects could take place. Is that?
That's correct in a manner of speaking, yeah. There were smoothing
Close
out so the projects
yeah,
could maintain their schedule.
Close enough for government work. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'd like to sort of pick up on Legislator Haney's questions, because I too was obviously struck by the massive increase in the doubling of the project estimate. What's the difference between, what was the difference in this case, of the unanticipated costs that you incurred when you started looking at what the water main issues would be and the depth of the road, versus the decision to expand the scope of the project and add lanes in, as you mentioned? It seems to me one would be more discretionary than the other, and I guess I'd like to get a sense for how that decision is made or was made in this particular case.
Through the chair, as we went through the preliminary engineering phase of this project, when we learned of the amount of development that was occurring in the area there, we would then naturally look at the amount of traffic that would be generated from that. Once we did the traffic projections, the amount of traffic that potentially could affect this corridor would have brought the corridor to a virtual halt, much worse than it's already experiencing. So in order to make the necessary structural improvements as well as deal with the projected traffic growth, we made a decision to try to incorporate as much capacity improvements as we could. As it stands, these improvements we are proposing do not accommodate what would be considered the full build-out out there. The full build-out would have been much more dramatic and costly, so we scaled back to a lesser level to try to get some benefit without totally disrupting the corridor.
Thank you. I can appreciate that, and I've been through that process a few times in Arundecoit, so I know what it's like. But this seemed pretty stark, and so I guess I'd like to ask through you, Mr. Chairman, does the Transportation Council keep track when a project like this increases by $3.5 million? There's got to be a direct impact, regardless of the smoothing, on other projects. Does it keep track of which projects get bumped down the line?
Through the chair, yes, it does. To elaborate on that a little bit, the Genesee Transportation Council went through several updates of the Transportation Improvement Program itself to accommodate the cost increases that were occurring, and as such, doing some rescheduling. So there was a collaborative effort with GTC, the state of New York, who administers the funding for the program, and all the member agencies. So yes, they do keep track of all those factors.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, do they so you said they update the member agencies, so would that be the Transportation Department?
Yeah, that's correct. All the counties in the 9-county region, as well as any local municipalities that have projects programmed in there, yes, all are updated.
So if at any point, through Mr. Chairman, we wanted to know what projects were being shifted in the transportation plan, we could ask you for that information.
Through the chair, certainly.
Okay. That's good to know. And through you, Mr. Chairman, another thing that sort of struck me about this, and I know in my days in the Transportation Committee, we probably had this conversation, I'd just like a refresher, was the nice round number that we're talking about here with the estimate being $7 million, when we already have now a bid for the largest portion being the construction. So it occurs to me that there's obviously a portion in the estimate that's built in for, I would assume, overruns or potential change orders or other unanticipated costs. What is the standard procedure or amount or percentage that we use in projects like this for that kind of cushion?
Through the chair, we typically would ask for a 5% contingency. In this case, we are asking for a 10% because some of the unknowns in the structural integrity of the project. We will only spend what we need to, obviously, though.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, maybe this is a question for the Finance Director, but if we do authorize borrowing for more than we need and it's not used, or it's borrowed, and maybe I can just ask, is that borrowed and does that stay in a fund, or does that get wiped out at any point?
Through the chair, that would, if in fact we did borrow for the project prior to its completion, those dollars would be locked to pay that debt service off into the future. Generally, we don't borrow in advance on projects like these because they are so heavily federally funded. We'll receive that reimbursement long before we would go to the market for this, and we would bond for whatever the remaining portion of the county's share was.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Legislator Tucciarello.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, why is this coming in front of us as a matter of importance?
Through the chair. We had, based on our original schedule, we had hoped to advertise this project in January, open bids in February. Then we would be able to introduce this as what we would consider a normal cycle. We were delayed from our approval to advertise by the New York State Department of Transportation through some other representatives in Albany. So once we finally got the approval to advertise, we were obviously a few weeks later than we had hoped. We would prefer to do this matter of importance so we could still award it at the April meeting as we had intended and still capture the full construction season.
Which brings me to my next questions. Do you have an approximate start date and an approximate end date through the chair?
Yes, through the chair. Assuming it's awarded at the April meeting, we would have a construction start in May, and we anticipate completing this project by the fall of 2013.
Thank you very much. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any unfinished business to come before this committee? Legislator Haney.
Mr. Chairman, on September 29th of last year, I, in my role as ranking minority member of this committee, sent a letter to the county executive asking for some documents related to Upstate Telecommunications, Inc. And I've never had a response to that letter. I'm wondering if the administration could indicate when I might expect to, since the letter is now 6 months old, when I might expect to get a response.
Mr. Chairman, I would have to get back to the legislator on that. I'm not handling that particular request, but I would be glad to look into it and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Any other unfinished business? Hearing none. There being no further business, the March 28th, 2012 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Ways and Means Committee is scheduled for April 25th, 2012.